see on these targets graph from the mark was about the third sector starts in general, not about CFA specifically, which is why we set up the East Hearts Community Alliance. We are working with its members on bid writing to access other funds. So this note kind of clarifies the graph I think the CFA received at the time. And on the basis of this note, we propose to leave them as they are and not change them. So,
with the addition that you just made, I propose that we accept minutes.
Thank you. With this clarification from minutes in this meeting, so over the 2 sets of minutes, there will be a written record of what was, I guess, what was discussed with regards to the coming up. So thank you, Councillor. We've got a proposal for a second. Councillor Booth seconded. We've got a proposal for a second. All those in favour? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. 3 declarations of interest. Declarations, everyone think or not? Come to them as a amending. Thank you. Chairman's announcements. I've got no chairman's announcements except just to remind councillors to use their microphones when we're speaking, which will allow the camera to identify the purposes of the broadcast. Thank you. Training, risk management.
Good evening, members. Risk management. I should now check that the risk might not work. Yes. Risk management is basically about understanding obstacles that could prevent the council from achieving its objectives and managing them accordingly. It's often associated with, or it used to concentrate on things like physical losses that could be insured, things like motor, property, slips and tricks. This slide lists some benefits of risk management, and a few examples are at East Hearts. If I take the fourth one about maximising opportunities, we acquired Over the Lane so we can control the development in Bishop Stortford, as provide an income stream, improved arts offering. In COVID, we took risk management by reducing face-to-face transactions. We massively shifted everybody to working from home, and we managed to do that in a fairly seamless way. And the council may be prepared to take greater risks if the risk is considered and well managed. So we've looked at, in particular, very recently, the last council meeting at Hertford Theatre, and there will be other commercial ventures which will come forward as part of the commercial work stream in our Transforming East Hearts programme. Risk management strategy describes how risk management will be carried out. So it's a straightforward process, and our systems reflect that. We've never made an industry out of it, and the last thing we ever want to do is make an industry out of risk management. In the past 18 months, there's been a push to improve governance processes. Last year, the strategy and processes were subject to a major overhaul, and as presented in this evening's reports, no changes are proposed given how the processes have been received and are working. I think members were pleased with the new format of risk management strategy. So we think we're doing our job well if members are pleased. Risk monitoring is now taken more seriously with updates provided by all heads of service. Previous regime, they weren't so keen as it was perceived to be fairly bureaucratic. I have to agree with that, which is why we changed it. And as a result of your recommendations, the executive now received the monitoring reports and corporate risk strategy, so they see them at their meetings as well. Strategic risks are headline risks that the council's leadership team manage, and we report these to you and to the executive. Operational risks are risks within service and or the corporate issues faced by most or all services across the council. Many are insurable, but look, don't let that constrain you. There are risks that are non-insurable in the system. So if we talk about these strategic risks here, if I go clockwise around the slide, you've got COVID. We all knew a pandemic was coming, but we never knew when it was exactly when it would come and what it would look like. COVID has changed our lives considerably and will probably continue to do so. Our IT shared service has added some risks as well as some rewards. This is the cable, the famous cable that's been cut on 2 occasions and caused a major outage, which is why we now have a microwave connection in Stevenage in case that cable is cut for a 3rd time. You can see there some of our major projects regeneration works. We've got funding the cost of materials, generating future income streams, availability of labour, Health and safety, only last week, Stevenage were demolishing a building, and that went very, very wrong for them. Fell down to the street. We've got whether something's insurable or not. We've got pollution risks. We've got changing building regulations since Grenfell. Many of the building regulations are changing and still changing. And we've got that ever-present risk of legal challenge, the JR. You'll probably recognise the report at Much Haven. We have climate change going on. We have climate change going on around us, and we can start to see the results of that. In terms of the financial climate, that's the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Councillor Williamson, and I listened to his every budget speech very carefully. And of course, there you can see from Bishop Stortford Independent, contractual performance at the Brexit issue, and difficulty in recruiting HGV drivers. So all of these risks come along. They're strategic risks we manage as a leadership team. In terms of operational risks, we've got Ict Service risks. Those corporate issues faced by most or all services across the council. Again, they're insurable, but some are obvious and some are not so obvious. So Warfields and Charringtons present a whole raft of issues for us. Some of them are less obvious. Obviously, we've got security, Brexit, lead theft, data loss. We've got business continuity, but we now have the backup of our ability to work more remotely at home. Staffing, there are a whole range of issues from staffing, from strikes, health and safety, lone working issues, slips and trips, Legionella, asbestos, gas, electricity. We've got property maintenance and management issues, we've got DDA compliance, environmental risks, lettings. We've got tenant management. The tenant left Charrington's house and left us a lovely pile of combustible materials. And you can see the tree there. That tree is, there are a whole issue of trees, and I see Jess here from operations and the expert on trees, but the first instance, have they been adopted? Are they inspected and maintained? Falling branches, falling trees, subsidence, collapsing drains. The tree you can see there in the car park, that will collapse due to moth larvae. And that's not something we could have predicted or seen from a visual inspection of the tree. And of course, there are the ever-present data risks and fraud, both from the public and from employees. You can see the picture of the combustible materials that tenant left there at Charrington's in that middle slide. In the implementation process, this takes place with members and the leadership team. I'll talk you through this in the next few slides. When we identify risks, we take the annual review of leadership team, meet with heads of service, we take it through the committee reporting process, and there are trade briefings and comparisons with other risk registers, particularly around emerging risks, which our insurance officer takes. Once risks have been identified, we then go through scoring using this matrix. So you can see the matrix there, and we manage the hot zone in the top right-hand corner. So the current score is provided rather than the residual score. So we do that. Next slide is that defines, and you'll see that you remember this from your risk management report, of what A, B, and C, and 1, 2, and 3 mean, what sort of impact it has, and that sort of stuff. An example of the register, which is in your papers, which we changed last year, where you can see that we have the vulnerability. When we know that vulnerability has been triggered, what the consequences are, mitigations that we have in place, and the risk owner, and then the narrative underneath the latest position of the members. The members are very interested in scrutinise, particularly the update of the current position of the narrative. So you should see very little movement in vulnerability, trigger, consequence, mitigation, unless new mitigations come on. But members will see that constant changing narrative there. In the reports, and then risks and the stage 5 integrated strategic and audit planning and decision making. So this is an example of committee report commentary. Members should challenge where necessary, not this one though, ensuring that risks are understood by members and officers. So members will see risk paragraphs and reports, and we do encourage you to read them carefully and to challenge them. We do have a document on the intranet concerning projects, including risk register templates, and high-level risks are discussed at the project board. So for each one of our major projects, there is a project risk register. It's considered at each project board, gone through in detail, and there has been some discussion and planning with officers, although there is sometimes we don't go into enough detail about some of those risks, particularly around some of the more esoteric parts of our operations, like multi-story car parks, etc., where should we have sprinklers or shouldn't we have sprinklers, etc., etc. The role of Audit and Governance Committee is elected members are responsible for governing the delivery of services to the local community. Members have a responsibility to understand the strategic risks that the council faces. All members will have the responsibility to consider the risks associated with the decisions they undertake and will be informed of these risks in the reports that are submitted to them. They cannot seek to avoid or delegate this overall responsibility as it's key to their stewardship responsibilities. And you in particular, as this committee, received a corporate risk register, the things that can set the council, can turn the council away from delivering its corporate objectives as specified in the corporate plan. So your role in this is rather crucial. So risk management is subject to frequent audit. 2016, 2019, 2020, 2022. 2022 report a weighted but substantial rating proposed for our risk management arrangements. And I believe internal audit are pleased with the improvements we've made in the past year. It's always good to hear that what we've done and changed is meeting internal audit's approval. We expect our recommendations of this internal audit report to be a consistent approach to risk management projects, which will be about just reinforcing the corporate scoring matrix. We will be reinstating operational risk management throughout services during 22-23. We will sit down with services and hold their hands through this to make sure they don't think it's an industry and to make sure that it is achievable and it's delivered. And we will be putting risk management onto Pentana, so that as well as seeing key performance indicators, members will also be able to see the corporate risk register and service risk registers as well. And we'll be doing staff training again on risk management. And in particular, in relation to the commercial work strand, we'll be asking members about risk appetite, about on the commercial strategy, what is the council's risk appetite, what is it prepared to invest in? And what sort of culture of municipal entrepreneurism that you want from that commercial strategy. So risk is not only about avoiding dangerous things, but taking a risk to make a return. And this will be the area we'll be exploring with members in the coming year. And turning to the future, we don't propose in the report for you tonight to change the risk management strategy or the processes for 22-23, but we will be reintroducing operational risk management across the council, and we'll escalate the highest level operational risk to monitoring and leadership team, and we'll develop a modular e-training platform for staff and members about risk management. But I do urge the members as a committee to continue to challenge the risk commentary of the company committee reports and to look carefully at the strategic risk register when you are looking at it. And that was very quick, and I'm conscious that members want to get on with the agenda. So if there are any questions, observations.
Thank you. Any questions? The question to start, and that's, you mentioned about internal audit and how they examine our risk analysis process. How closely do our external auditors look at that? Do you look at, as part of your annual report, do you look at the risk register as an annual course and I guess comment on that?
Thank you, Chair. We look at the risk register for a number of purposes, so we feed into our own risk assessment process to identify potential risks that could impact on either financial statements or a value company conclusion work. We also look at the risk register as part of that value company conclusion work as a matter of course, and assess the adequacy of the council's risk management arrangements. So if we identified what we thought we needed in those arrangements, those would be due by our commentary on value for money. We would obviously face reliance on what the internal audit have done on that area. We continue to take that work, but we do consider the risk management arrangements on an annual basis.
Thank you. That's useful. Thanks very much. One other question, you mentioned emerging risks. How much time in the process is spent considering emerging risks, and how do you treat these? Is that part of the process?
It's part of the process. My insurance and risk manager spends time with each head of service updating their section of risk register. Then it's considered a leadership team. And then it will come here, and obviously members will have an opportunity if they think there's an emerging risk to feed that in. And then it does, as I say, go to executive now upon your recommendation. So if the executive spot anything as well. And it's basically just listening out at stuff that goes on. It's why I don't sit in an office. It's why I sit out with the rest of the staff in an open plan area, because I can hear and see what goes on. And I learn far more by doing that than I would be behind walls and doors. So, and I think that applies across the board. I think leadership team are coming out of their offices and into the open plan, and I think it's proving to be better for us all to have a better understanding of what's going on in the business. I mean, I do walk around, I do listen to things, I do talk to people, so, and issues do come up, you think, oh, that's interesting, I didn't know about that. So it's about having that inquiring mind, it's about listening, it's about joining those dots and having that risk management ethos in your mind, and also risk opportunity stuff as well, because things come along and you think, actually, there's an opportunity there, it's a bit risky, is it too risky? And that's the part of risk management we want to evolve more and bring forward, is that there's an opportunity, what's the risk associated with it? Is that a manageable risk for us? And that will be very much about members' risk appetite, because we don't want to be in a situation of putting public money into something that, that we're going to lose that money. I think sometimes if you're going to be commercial, you have to accept there will be occasions when there are things that go wrong, but we shouldn't penalise people for that. We should accept there is that risk and take that risk if it suits our purpose. But this is not a blank check for officers to go off on some sort of risky rampage of wasting public money, doing something unlawful, etc. There will be business cases that will have to be worked through. There will be gateway stages where stuff can be checked and checked through again and validated. And only when it's passed through all of those gateway stages will it go to members and to say, what do you think? Of course, members can say that's just too risky for us. But it's about, I guess it's about members being prepared to say what their risk appetite is for a commercial venture.
Going back to the emerging risks, I didn't, forgive me if I missed it, I didn't see any sort of real mention of emerging risks in the risk report that we got.
I think in terms of emerging risks, it's how fast climate change is going to happen.
Yeah.
And how often it's going to happen, because what we're seeing is 1 in 100 events are now becoming 1 in 50 events. And we're seeing more and more of these climate-related, sudden downpours that are causing local flooding. Heat is a particular issue, cold. I mean, a couple of years ago when it was lockdown, it was about 25 degrees outside now. And, it's currently 13 degrees, we're getting extremes of weather year to year. And I think the emerging risks there are how resilient are our buildings, how adapted to climate change are they?
Sure. So in which case then should the risks that you list as emerging be included somewhere within the
I think if the climate change one is there, and we talk about part of what we'll be doing at Wallfields to make a decision about whether we stay at Wallfields or move to County Hall is how much money we have to spend on Wallfields building. And part of that will be about adaptation to climate change. On the top floor at Wallfields, when it's 24 degrees outside, it's 24 degrees inside. And when it's 13 degrees outside, it's blooming cold on the top floor, because the walls are very thin, there's no insulation in them. One of the boilers is gone, completely is unrepairable, and we're frankly cannibalising it with spares to fix the other boiler to keep it going. If we have to change, we're not going to install a gas boiler, I don't believe. We need to change the heating system, which means air or ground source heat pumps, which means underfloor heating. You can see a big bill racking up already. Yeah. The building was last properly rewired when it was built. There are a whole multitude of things we think we know that maybe we don't know, and there are other issues. And ventilation in the building is very poor. We have whole sets of windows with these vents in. Now that system could never work without an atrium to actually create a through draft. So it was a pretty pointless exercise in putting them in, I think. So there's all sorts of things, and when we add all of that up in the capital cost of it, it may well not make sense to stay at Wallfields, but to come here. But we have to be certain that if we do come here, this building is capable of adaptation at no real cost to us, or is already adapted to us, to climate change in the future. Because if you're having extremes of temperature of 30, 40 degrees outside, it's going to be 30 or 40 degrees inside Wallfields. I can't think above 24 degrees. So it's that sort of thing that we have to think about, in terms of extreme heat. Will refuse crews go out all during the day, or will you have refuse crews very early in the morning and refuse crews working in the evening in the summer? So there's all sorts of those adaptation things that we need to do as well, which we're beginning to think through in the climate change forum, we're beginning to think through as officers. But that's the main emerging risk for us at the moment, and we are starting now to push and work on that, what that adaptation means. So our service contracts will need to change, our buildings will need to change. And if anybody thought a refuse freighter with air conditioning was a luxury, I don't think it's going to be in the future. They are going to need air conditioning, that sort of thing in the vehicle. So it's about thinking that through and being ready, because if you buy a refuse vehicle, it has to last 7 years. The next contract's in 2 years. So we need to be thinking through these things now about how we deal with climate change, how we deal with HGV driver shortages, how we deal with the government's mandated national collection system. What happens if this bring your bottle and get your refund back? It's going to take recyclable materials out of the municipal waste stream. Suddenly recycling becomes, instead of a resource that we can sell, it becomes a cost to have hauled away. So there's all sorts of things that we have to think through like this. So there's an example of emerging risk there on waste. You know, that we are thinking through, and I think Jeff's going to take through some member groups on as we consider this waste contract, then there's the parking contract, the ground maintenance contract. There are all sorts of those sorts of issues that are starting to emerge that we need to start thinking about and identifying now in order to feed into those contracting processes.
Will these risks that you're starting to identify as emerging risks, will there be a section within the risk report we see entitled emerging risks on our response rather than them being established risks? Do you think?
I can put those in, Chairman, if you'd like to see it in that particular way.
Yeah, good. Part of my data, we have to have risk reports, not dissimilar to the ones we have for the council, and we are introducing a section in addition to the established risks that we all know. Actually, a section on the sorts of emerging risks that we're thinking about. I think it will be quite useful for us. I think for officers too, to have them sort of noted down, and they would change as your thinking changes.
Yeah, yeah, we've certainly put emerging risks in.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a really useful. Thank you very much indeed for that presentation. Very nice pictures as well.
Yeah, just on that point, so rather than having a separate section on emerging risks, would they not be better to appear in the section that they are relevant to, with perhaps a track change or some sort of way of indicating this is new emerging within this section? If there's already a climate change section, then it's just highlighting the emerging risk within that section, if you see what I mean, Chairman.
Yeah, I do. I think that's a valid suggestion. Maybe it's something else to consider in what they might do on this. Thank you. That's a good point. Thank you very much. I think we've done that. So thank you very much indeed for that. That's incredibly. Thank you. So that brings us on to item 6, measure annual report, that begins on page 23. That's about, so you're going to do on this.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. While they're setting up the presentation, I'll just give a brief introduction. So it is a brief introduction from me before we hand over to everyone active. And first thing I need to say is it's very much an operational report rather than policy. So I'll be mainly in listening mode, but I'll be interested to hear your questions and comments after the presentation. A few points to note. So the current leisure contract was everyone active in January 2020. And then following the pandemic and the series of closures for the leisure facilities, this report will provide an overview of performance since the start of the new contract, so that needs to be borne in mind. And for a number of reasons, including the need to have COVID secure working practices, and customer confidence, and delays to capital projects, it's been a challenging time, and certainly to achieve pre-pandemic performance levels. Members will be aware that the new Grange Palace Leisure Centre opened in late October 2021, and we are expecting Hartston Leisure Centre to complete in summer 2023, but with the swimming pool, we're aiming for that to reopen at the end of this month, following some relining work that's been done and other improvements. And finally, the 3G pitch is due to complete at the end of August, and that will be ready hopefully for the new football season. We do anticipate customer confidence and interest in our leisure centres to grow over time and exceed previous performance levels. So despite all the challenges, Chairman, we've actually achieved quite a lot working with our contractors and service providers, and I'd like to thank them all and our officers for their cooperation during this period. So now I'd like to hand over to our partners from everyone active. We've got Duncan Cogger and Dan Humphries to present the annual report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to all of you. Very great job of introducing where we are. 2021 and pandemic year that followed previously have been a very interesting and challenging year. 2021 we brought the advent of new approach products, and as we go through the report, it outlines what we've kind of achieved mainly in 2021. So you'll get a bit of an overview in terms of what we're doing. We've broken it down so it's a little bit more of a readable report as opposed to the main document that's been submitted by the council. The big question comes is, what do we do during the lockdown phase? So one of the things that we've been doing during our first quarter of 2021, we've obviously been investing. One of the things that we were fortunate to agree with the council was that we managed to expedite some of the fit out costs of the new centre to refresh the cardiac hospital equipment, which we did last January. That was very well refreshed and welcomed by the customers coming back in April. We also used Carter and Franchise testing sites, very systematic testing in partnership with Carter County Council. And obviously during that lockdown phase, we were making sure the buildings were compliant, ready to open when Forest gave us the green light to get started again. So our overview in terms of that first quarter gives you a bit of a snapshot in terms of what the new kits at heart looks like in the cargo area. It also gives you a bit of an idea in terms of what we can do as an operator in partnership with council. So one of the things that we did is that we linked in our Everyone Active app, providing customers who are part of our membership sites the opportunity to exercise online for everyone on demand, whether they were doing a body pump class, whether they were doing a workout. We also integrated on social media live workouts, which were a regular feature where customers, whether they use this service or not, could participate in the leg function session, chair mobility session, just to try and keep people going during that lockdown phase where they weren't able to access the centre. We also used that lockdown phase to kind of highlight the opportunity to give back to NHS workers. One of our campaigns at the back end of February and March 21 was Lockdown Legends. So we went out to the local communities to offer free memberships to NHS staff, and they were very well received in April, May time. As a free gift back for those NHS staff that obviously were during that pandemic phase. Equally with that, we looked at people nominating their lockdown legends, people that have done a great job in the local community during that phase. And we move on to the next slide, which is quarter 2. When we were in a lot of preparation to get started back in, I'm sure as Stephen spoke earlier about in terms of risk, one of the key focus that we've got is that as a service-based industry, we need to be COVID secure. Thankfully, or unfortunately, we've been in that situation before with reopen and we were COVID secure, where we spent a lot of time retraining staff, re-educating staff, and obviously during that phase, there's a high commitment in terms of cleaning to make sure high contact points are done, and as Eric's rightly pointed out, making sure things around consumer confidence levels are as high as they can be. One of the things that when we talk about participation, you'll start to see certain demographics that consumer confidence different in different age classifications, which is an impact of what we've got. In April, we started a walking test session for walking netball, which was very well received. Unfortunately, our half months on 3G picture, the weather got slightly worse towards the end of autumn. That's not quite common with the winter phase, which we find, but that's something that we're restarting again this year. During quarter 3, we introduced free Save a Life series. One of the things that we were keen to do is give back to our community. We offered free CPR training sessions for new parents who could come in and do a 4-hour taster session or a session, practical session, instead of understanding what would happen with the basic day-to-day. So that's something that we rolled out half and something that we're going to continue to do going forward. We also linked in with one of our partners, which is Saracens Mavericks, and we work with Virtual High School, where we have critical netball camps going on, just to provide a bit of diversification in terms of what we're doing. And again, it was July last year, and I think it's actually this week, the swim event. It's an annual event that we do, raising money for Marie Curie in partnership with the picture that you've got there is taken from a small group of children from the local community, which is thought that they managed to raise just over, I think, £1,900 for their efforts. And those sort of things that provide for us to kind of see people getting back into the community, exercising, and what's quarter 4, which is on the next slide, is when things really start to get interesting and fun for us. Those of you that listened to me during our BRP launch The Grange Paddocks will recognise some of the photos that we've got there. But 23rd October, we opened Grange Paddocks, a huge success. Eric did an amazing job alongside Colin Jackson, and that was very well received. To open the centre, what we did is we did a new event called the Big Splash event, where unfortunately we missed getting 100 children or young people in to a Big Splash event where they participated in the first group session in Grange Paddocks, where they did a variety of events from singing with, swimming with an Olympic swimmer, again doing some lifestyle reporting, and really kind of being a very big community activity event on the day. One of the things on the right hand side that we've been fortunate to do with the advent that there being more facilities at Grange Paddocks, we've worked with Park Sports Partnership, and I know something that I think that's probably 9 months ago, March, where I thought was very interesting to promote the school mills. Park Sports Partnership linked in with some funding where they are supporting ourselves to provide holiday activity camps for children from disadvantaged backgrounds that may well be food deprivation. What happens in the camp, they come in for 6 hours. Part of that camp is a situation that they get some kind of activity management and they get a healthy nutrition of that. That's on again this week at Grange Paddocks, half term, and the same next week. It's been well received, having started in December this year. If you go on to the next slide. One of the things that Eric was talking about was the COVID situation. One of the things that's critical to understand when we start to talk about participation in 2020 and 2021 is the restrictions that were placed on us. I know Stephen in his report has spoken about ventilation, that was a main key factor for UK acting the government in terms of reopening during COVID-19 restrictions. We basically went from a situation at Harton where our group exercise capacities went from 29 to 12. In the old Grange Paddocks, they went from 25 to 10, and we're in a situation that we kind of consumer demand that. Yes, there was lots of space, yes, there was that, but there was a lot of blame demand for people wanting to get into their sessions. Similarly with swimming. On the bus side, from October onwards, New Grange Paddocks has provided us with a significant increase in capacity that we've got to provide those opportunities for people to become more active. The gym capacities are around increased by 115%. The swimming pool again has increased in excess of 92% of the lane pool. And it being 8 lane pools as opposed to 5 lane pool that we had in the old centre provides us with much more of an opportunity to provide public swimming sessions, which they will see by the public. On the next slide, you'll see total attendances. And again, as Eric highlighted, we've put the 2019 figures in there. On the face of it, there is an increase of 11.4%. Thing to bear in mind is that we only reopened on the 14th of April last year. So in reality, we're kind of looking at 9 months worth of data, 8.5 or less. And when we compare it to kind of pre-COVID levels, we are kind of looking at different periods when we look at that. We are confident going forward that we are starting to see that change. Obviously, participation is a big thing in terms of what that gives back on social value and the implications to power people. It is positive going forward. I'm in the process of just moving forward before, and the number of very positive this year from January to March going forward. I'm confident that the green shoots improvements that we've seen, the total participation that we're confident we're going to get close to over 1 million this year. We anticipate we're going to exceed that by the end of this current year. On the next slide, we'll see total swimming numbers. Now, again, as Eric highlighted, is that for various different reasons, the hardcore refurbishment has kind of impacted what we've got. There are positive and negative impacts in that. One of the things that you probably can't quite see in the slide is that at the back end of the current year, from October to December, we actually hit all of our historical numbers without Harton being because of the advent of the capacity increases that we see at Grange Paddocks. So swimming from a total swimming perspective was up by 40% in comparison to 2020. Under 16 swimming, again, some of that has been impacted down to the fact that when we were looking at the capacities, our learning pool capacities were vastly reduced during the COVID secure scenario. They've increased by 16%, and we're seeing that really start to come back very quickly. 60+ swimming haven't quite hit the same levels, and that's come back at a 28% increase. And again, adult swimming has been hugely popular, with a 42% increase in terms of all the historically next slide, you'll see fitness participation. We break that down into 3 key areas. Total fitness, which is the amalgamation of the gym and the group exercise. And you'll see that we achieved 225,501 visits. Last year, this was an increase of 11,500, which is very positive in relation to what we're looking for. The gym alone makes up 30% of that increase, and group exercise owns various different restrictions that we spoke about already in terms of where we were. It's increased by 1%. We expect that's going to continue to go at a higher rate this year. On to the next slide. Participation is broken down into different area groups. Gym usage, we see that under 16 gym usage in 2021 increased by 86%. I know just 4,438 more visits last calendar year than there was in the previous year. Gym usage again increased in terms of adults by 32%. Then unfortunately, the bottom left should read senior gym sessions, and that's again, that's increased by best part of 25% in relation to that. Now, one of the things that we do, it's always been saying about participation, we look at the number of unique users. So in the top right-hand corner, the active users are unique individual users. So it's not the case that if you've got one customer coming 50 times, these are the number of individual people that are coming in. Bizarrely, this is the only kind of negative is that we've seen a decline in the total number of people using the centres. The perception that we've got is that we're not having a full wave and a half them. The actual unique numbers is only 464 people. We believe that's kind of been impacted by half four projects, and they're confident and we're starting to see that kind of come back now this year. In terms of the number of people that are using the centres to 30 minutes 5 times a week, again, we've seen that increase by 20%, and that's an uplift in 2021 of 129 users. Again, football usage has increased by 3% across the board. We've seen the advent of 3G pitch, which is the pitch at park increased by 34%. On to the next slide, which is our demographic breakdown by profile. Now, there's obviously quite a lot of demographics that we broke down there. One of the things broken down into male and female. What we tend to do is try and look at overall trends and patterns. One of the things that we've seen a lot of is that working in the COVID school environment is that we haven't necessarily seen a lot of families coming swimming until after the restrictions have ended. So until August, so until mid-August when the restrictions ended, and then we could get more people into the pool. We've seen that from 5 to 11-year-olds haven't necessarily seen the same level of growth that we see across the board. What we do see is we see young adults pretty much through until the age of 50 and come back in huge abundance. Now, when Eric earlier was talking about consumer confidence, one of the things that we've seen, and again, we feel this is slightly aligned with, when we look at the resources that we've got in these parts, not having half boards, a big opportunity for older adults to be active in our community. We feel that that's part of the reason why from 50 plus to 60 plus, we start to see some of those numbers dropping off slightly. Equally, COVID and the risk around some of those multiple roles is probably kept some of the consumer confidence now too. One of the things that we've done is make a big beeline in terms of making sure that whilst the restrictions in those corners are not there, we've kept the practices that stood us in good test of times with hand sanitizers, cleaning kits, every 20 gym sessions that we've got, so that there is more than enough opportunity for the good practices that people have kept up during the COVID, secure operating time to continue to kind of boost that sort of confidence. We're very positive in terms of what we've got going forward. What we have seen from a non-resident perspective is there's a slight drop. What we are finding, we've just recently done a bit of work on the number of unique users at each of the centres of whether they're residents or non-residents, and it will come from no surprise that where our leisure centres are on neighbouring boroughs like Wishaw and Londonthorpe, we start to see the percentage of residents and non-residents is very different in those areas as opposed to being half. Moving on to the next slide. One of the chicken and egg scenarios is our learn to swim scheme, and swimming is a life skill and vitally important for the children to learn to swim. Now, pre-COVID, we were in a situation that probably lost about 35% of our business from customers during our initial lockdown from somewhat March 2020 to June, July, deciding not necessarily to come back, or the family things for the children to come back into. What you do see is that we are in a situation that there are green shoots of improvement in terms of the number of new people joining the scheme is up. We've got 863 new people coming into that, and we're in a situation at the scheme level where we're actually at about 29% of the scheme we've got. Fantastically, branch products. You know, we've taken the scheme from at the end of December 20, about 969 to just shy of 1,700 at the end of December this year just got. Equally from the school swim side, although we have 5 sites with the dual use sites, most of the educational lessons are organised by the school sites themselves, because that's part of their dual use time. What we did see is a real positive is we've seen 9 schools change branch products, and that number is increasing gradually as we get closer. So I think that's part of what we'll be taking further going forward. On the next slide, you'll see our membership scheme, which is people that sign up to our membership. Naturally, the advent of branch products you'll see in terms of the new sales perspective, that's certainly climbs dramatically into where we've got to. And overall, we see that big increase from where we were in 2020 to where we are now in 2021. Both the membership places in there. Branch products pretty much have seen a 100% increase in terms of this membership capacity, which therefore, if more people using that service can have the market needs. On the next slide, we talked very briefly about the environmental and energy thing. If I'm honest, we're in a situation with gas, energy, water. It's slightly convoluted in the sense that during the lockdown periods, we had reduced some of the energy down. So to kind of compare that year on year, it's really difficult to get a football in terms of seeing where we are and where we're not. What we had learned is during the previous lockdown phases is that we weren't necessarily given a huge amount of extra price to get sets back up, but we made sure that all temperatures were slightly lower, so that we weren't necessarily managing the economically. What we have seen from an environmental perspective is we have seen that almost a 1% improvement in our recycling rates, which, given the huge amounts of sensitivity that customers now use to clean kit down, which isn't recyclable, unfortunately, it is a positive change. One of the things that we also done going forward is that we have a target in terms of reducing plastics. We've reduced single-use plastic soap pouches. So one of the things that we used to use is a closed plastic soap, which was recyclable. Unfortunately, we don't necessarily use recyclable as much as it was. We've estimated that saved as part of 250,000 single-use plastics by the fact that we've now invested in different circumstances where they're now topped up, filled up, and not a situation that they should be touch wood. In circumstances that are equally, one of the things that we've done with the advent of the use of customers booking online is our Everyone Active app now allows customers to have their app, on the app, have their card ready and scanning all 5 centres. We anticipate that the minimum that's going to save us 5,000 plastic membership cards, which is a positive thing going forward for that. From an environmental and active travel perspective, obviously doing surveys with customers face-to-face has been hugely challenging during the pandemic period. One of the periods that we saw is that we have seen a slight increase in terms of the number of people using cycling, and obviously a reduction in the number of people using bicycles. It gives you a bit of a snapshot in that presentation of the ideas that we've got going forward, that we've introduced with Grange Products as a commitment to being green. All of our new colleagues and all of our existing colleagues have signed a commitment to being greener, which is quite simply a case of making sure that they use the right amount of chemicals, they make sure they use the recycling bits, making sure they identify any lights or any leaves that are there, make sure that environmentally everything becomes everybody's responsibility and we're all really accountable for that. From a digitalisation perspective, what we've seen is that we can kind of look at bookings. We obviously have a hugely popular app, and as I mentioned here, you can't really download it, so you do it there, and I'm sure we got this. You just do that. We've basically seen over the last 12 months an increase in the number of people booking digitally. Now we're basically seeing 82% of our customers interacting with the Active app, which is 67%, all booking online via the website, and that production is doing that with current historic issues, trying to book on the phone. We've now proved that and people have the opportunity to book there. One of the positive things that we've done from the service perspective that I think we learned with positive COVID is that we need to do, so we need to provide swimming for the session. One of the things that we've kept going is provides people the opportunity to book in the same way you would do for a group exercise class, that they know they can book into a specific lane at a specific time, see how many people are in that lane so they know how busy it is. And that's something that I'm confident actually starts to increase also participation across the contract for us. On the next slide, there is some operational safety. From an accident perspective, we have seen a decrease in accidents. What we have seen is an increase in the number of feedback that we receive. Obviously, getting a branch balance led to a huge increase. We've just spoken about the drive towards being digital. We use a system called single customer key, where all of our feedback is pulled through into this and we're generating it for us. And we're pretty much averaging between 500 and 700 feedbacks and tickets from customers inquiring about various different things. From a satisfaction perspective, we've seen a small increase from 19 up 22%, and the problem going forward, that's 50. From a cleanliness perspective, again, similarly, we've seen a slight increase of 0.04%. On the next slide, is an overview in terms of our colleagues. Just a snapshot of all the report back to officers. 54% of our managers are female, 85% of our colleagues live in 2020 drive time. That's a total of 54% of all our colleagues are female. 3.9% of our colleagues have a disability. One of the things that we're focusing on over the next couple of years is dementia-friendly training. We're currently actually doing college training and now introducing one of our colleagues in a customer service closed environment will receive dementia-friendly training by the end of this year. We think going forward, the key area that we make sure that people understand and can recognise that people have dementia and be in a situation and make that experience of their values and positive one that makes the way you can practice. We've also trained 19 new lifeguards. One of the things that Stephen mentioned in this report is that of course we're now in that situation where giving training opportunities to local people, and of those 18 people, 16 of those people live in the local community that we provide what normally would have been a 200 training course for them to come along. On the next slide is our sporting champions. This has been around since 2016. And we'll actually, this year, the applications just started. We were basically in a situation where we were offered free access to semi-elite and aspiring athletes going forward. We have left part of 90 recipients of in these cards. That's something that will go out on social media pages over the next couple of days. Business, any semi-elite athlete or people that are aspiring to be in the next Olympics and perhaps beyond, be referring to our forward champions to help them going forward. On the next slide is just a bit of a snapshot in terms of what we've got carrying forward in 2022, and really want to talk about COVID in relation to that. We are investing and have invested in large-scale placement sessions. One of the things that pre-pandemic, COVID, was trying to create fun and interest in the ball. One of the things that we've done apart from grants is invest in the inflatable sessions that you will see there. These are actually the inflatable branch products. You'll see a lot of people use inflatable sessions in Western Farm. They do it at the Liability Aquatic Centre, where they get an aquatic network, they get a life jacket on, and all ages, families, and adults can go into that, provides a fantastic fun environment. That's something that we're looking at which we made. Similarly, in branch products, one of the things that we are keen to do is we're investing in some lighting and some additional features that are going to go in what we're calling the splash lagoon. We're waiting for an installation back on that. That's been hugely popular with a lot of young families and adults using that learning pool and using that splash with confidence zone that's back in the pool. One of the things that we're just planning to introduce in September is working in a partnership with a company called Good Boost. One of the things that they do is practice-based therapy sessions, and that's tablet-based. It's ideal for people with arthritis and joint conditions. And we view that as an opportunity for us to target more mature users who may not necessarily be quite yet ready to join the gyms, but may want to do some activity, but not necessarily just late to it. On the next slide, on the final slide, it's just the development in terms of what we've got for our adults. We mentioned that attendance in 2021 is down from what we saw in previous years. We've looked at the Parks County Council and as a partner, we're leading on this in East Parts. Well, we're leading this for East Parts and Interactive, where we're providing Sunday free cards. We're targeting 200 people. That campaign starts in May, being managed by Parks County Council, and they get Sunday free cards at any of our centres. What we intend to use it for is to target this into people that might not necessarily be part of our user group, might not necessarily be aware of the centres, and then that into health practitioners, local authorities, and social care agencies. One of the slightly different things that we've done, and again, I think the pandemic has brought a myriad of different health agendas to our attention, is we've linked in with Table Tennis England and Branch Collective, all the other capacity to do some Harton, where we introduce various different table tennis. Table tennis sessions. One of the things that we've done is we've introduced this chat and back session. So the idea then is it's not really sport, it's more a case of people coming along, interactive, playing some table tennis, having a coffee, and it kind of really put itself active to get people to become ready to become more active. That's pretty much all I have. So I don't know. Answer any questions.
Thank you very much. That's very well. Thank you. The question is, we just need to bear in mind that the report at the beginning of page 75 there's certain sort of commercially sensitive areas that have been redacted. So if we made a statement, I want to discuss any items that may be commercially sensitive, may need to go into part 2. Hopefully, we won't discuss it. Just remember to know. Chris, you have a question? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the comprehensive report. I do feel that the numbers obviously is a little bit premature, but there are encouraging signs, so that'll be good. And hopefully this year's final numbers will show that we get back up to those pre-COVID levels. Just a couple of user groups, just to ask whether or not they're being catered for and you're doing anything. First of all, those people that hadn't had the customer confidence to return, had the interactive offer continued. You touched at the end there on older people. Is anyone, are you working with any partners, charities, to reach out to isolated people, particularly older people, perhaps going through bereavement because of the importance of staying physically active and meeting other people? And then the other one, sort of correlated to that, would also be working with mental health, because again, one of the main treatments for mental health is to get more active than you currently are. So just those two groups, if I may, Chair.
Sure, so I think there's probably about 2 or 3 questions in there in various different cards. But if we work backwards, in terms of mental health, it's at the forefront of what we try to bring forward. We've obviously had a big focus in terms of chronic mental health, and we're doing a lot of work with Charity Mind, and where we've got links in certain localities, we're working directly with those mind groups to try and bring more people in. If I'm going to be brutally honest, we can always do more on that setting avenue that we're kind of keen to explore. One of the things that we're working on a colleague perspective is just mental well-being. In the sense that we're trying to get people to understand that whilst we talk about physical activity, the fact that escaping the house, escaping the children, I'm not talking about myself there, but having that opportunity to have 30, 40 minutes to swim on my own is great for mental health. And that's one of the things that we're trying to underline, and I appreciate numbers is probably the right of it when we talk about mental health, but that's where we're kind of targeting the holistic approach in terms of activity. Yes, we can do more. Yes, we can always kind of work where we want to be on that front. You mentioned in terms of people in isolation. If I'm honest, we are trying to do that, and we have a community activities manager who has whole plethora of role that he's trying to get into some non-traditional activities. Whereas previously, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we would call that person a sports development officer. We're certainly more than aware that sport is one of the big activities. We want to be in a situation to do that. There is still one that we can still know. If you're aware of any links that you've got that may provide or where interest in your communities, we'll be happy to hear and happy to help to see what that's something that and I think there's one other question yes, that's good.
Yeah, the Open Access Online offering also has, as well as physical exercise, also has training schemes for mind as well. So we do actually offer a whole plethora of different activities through that online app and activities, both from exercise and referral to mind and body to physical exercise as well. So those things that are isolated, there is a product there that can support them as well. So again, knowing who the right people are to speak to, getting into those right people through being more out into the manager in sparks, we'll be happy to do whatever it is that we need to do. So yeah, we are here.
That's what come.
Thank you. Yeah, just a thought really. So I know everyone active over the years have worked with various community initiatives, and it's also, I think, for us as members to have a joined up approach. So we've got the healthy hubs, haven't we? And there are things for people with dementia or who are more isolated. I know there's a program with Active, who that's their current name, but they're actually doing the interactive cycling whereby you can see a screen in front of you. And again, it's a little bit like just drawing people into having some fun, but in the meantime, they're having some exercise. So I think if we can just join all of these things up, and maybe as you develop perhaps more, maybe workout programs or things that people do, which might include health walks along with visits to the gym or swimming pool. I think the potential is there.
Yeah, I think that kind of combines in with back to an earlier activity that Dan mentioned with regard to the netball camps, which we are actually utilising sports halls of local schools. So yes, we will look to do activity outside of the traditional four walls of our building. We've got absolutely no problem doing that. We're here with the local community and we want to get them in. One of our most recent things that we're doing is actually working with Parkinson's UK, and we're now offering anybody suffering from Parkinson's a free membership to our leisure facilities. So again, that's nationwide. I think I can't remember the exact number of people that suffer from Parkinson's, but yeah, we're looking at all different avenues. We're looking at all different types of communities. It's something that we can use our four walls and our facilities to get people out there.
That includes the wider disabled community, to increasing their sort of use of the use of the facility.
Yeah, of course. COVID hasn't been helpful with that. And we've certainly seen the return of disabilities during sessions and accessible during sessions. We're seeing we're more branch bags where we've got more of that link in Great Cottage. We're in discussion with them about having we're always mindful of how it's patient because I think it needs to be very inclusivity. And we have something to enhance it and make sure that we include.
Thank you. Stanton.
Thank you, Chair. I won't ask all my questions now. I'll send you some via email, so I'll put it out further. That's pushing it up. One of the first things is with regard to parking issues. Presumably, this is assumption on my part. Once the development is finished, then another benefit of parking space will be open up. Because that's often a challenge when clients actually get there in time for their session. Sometimes then
This is regarding branch bags. Yes. Yeah. So that's
Hello. Yes. So briefly, pitch work should commence shortly, and then hopefully by the end of August will be released by spaces. We do have a media pod also available for doing business spaces. So it is a case of members working with us and residents until we complete that. I know it's unfortunate, but we will try promoting the green channel when possible.
Thank you very much. I'd like to sneak in a couple of other quick ones. I've already talked to you about the changes in circumstances there. Can I just say, credit where it's due? That is a phenomenal facility that's been opened. And I joined up the day before that, and I'm very lucky there, and have used it quite a lot. Although there has been a miracle just to check. Councillor Hazy's often asked me whether I've got a light on that. It is so well worth the time and the effort for anyone to get, and I will strongly promote it to more people, certainly my mind, anybody else that raises it. Now, otherwise, as I say, I won't raise these questions separately because there are a number that I have. One other one that was raised to me recently are some concerns. I don't say they're unjustified, but I feel that they're possibly more limited in the fact that some people weren't ready for or feel uncomfortable with some of the joint changing facilities. Now, I know you also have an adequate supply of closed changing facilities, but if it's something that you can add into perhaps your discussions and inquiries to see how people are feeling about it. Because I've had these questions from different sorts of categories of people. Some perhaps more worried about children being in the environment where maybe there's other seating connection, whatever. Some people that have gender assignment differences and they feel uncomfortable about where they may or may not be. Obviously, it's a critical issue to address. It might be something that has all been
we are as the grants back to the change village, which is next. There are, I think, the best part of key calls there, and good changing rooms for schools, and upstairs in the dry change rooms, there is substantially large now active change rooms, which are supported by 3 accessible change rooms. It's a balance in terms of getting it right for all users, and I think the challenge that we face today. We will happily talk to anybody if there's any specific needs and specific interests that we need to do it in a sensible manner. Our colleagues are trained in such things. We can have that conversation. There is specific people that have got around which schedule needs to use.
Thank you very much. And one last comment, which I said credit where it's due. There's been a huge amount of work put in by an awful lot of people on this, and we owe them a very large debt of thanks. Especially guys, your time and effort, all that you do on a daily basis, and that's what we do. So thank you.
Thank you. That's all for your question.
Thank you. Just a few comments and observations. First of all, can we have that presentation sent to us as council? It was very interesting. I have to say, I couldn't get it on here. I'm obviously not IT efficient, but I would like to be able to see it again. I thought it was very interesting, but there's so much information there, you can't take it all in one go. I do have a couple of comments. First of all, as a youngster, I was a very keen swimmer, and I could actually swim 10 miles. I couldn't probably do that. Well, no, I couldn't do it now, but so I do love swimming. But I do have concerns. It's really good that you're looking at young families. I'm thinking about the young adults, teenagers, women. What's being done with them? I know that probably a bit better, but I'm just wondering whether youngsters like to socialise. Is there an opportunity to provide a socialising area for the youngsters? I know that there's a restaurant or cafe, whatever you want to call it, which is very attractive. But you get it with the youngsters and the adults, we tell them to shut up and they'll be tutting. Because I know that's what adults do about young adults. So I wonder whether there's an opportunity to provide an area where when they come to what they're doing, either in the gym bit or in the swimming bit, where they can socialise together, which then makes them feel it's an interesting an activity that they can enjoy mutually. So I want to read about that. I'm also concerned about how we get to the deprived families and the gear that they need to go swimming. Youngsters need swimming clothes, swimming costumes too. How are they going to be helped? Because quite often they feel slightly stigmatized because they haven't got a swimsuit. And it's important that they're not put off because they haven't got the gear to go with that particular activity. So I'm wondering what facilities could be made available or how they can be helped to enjoy going swimming. And also, how are they, if you like, accessing the service? Do they get a voucher which says, well, this is a deprived family? How do they actually get to enjoy the experience of swimming without feeling stigmatized and you know, set apart as not having enough money to do something? So these are all about the sensitivities around how we handle people and say young families seem to be coping with them reasonably well. It's that teenage group that I think we do tend to forget about, or they're regarded as just a bit of an irritation in any setting. So anyway, those are my comments. Thank you.
Sure. So, in terms of the young adults, one of the things that we're finding with Grange Products is that there is a massive interest in, I'm not sure necessarily we've got the right term for this in terms of our teen gym session, which is 11 to 17. Now, they're supervised gym sessions, and we're seeing those sessions are hugely popular at Grange Products, and we're actually starting to see that fill out our hearts. And so we are doing as much as we can to gym. At the moment, we don't necessarily have group exercise offering for that teen market. That's something that as an industry we're probably not as good as we should be in terms of that. You mentioned in terms of our social space. One of the things that we're really working on the effort of the 3G pitch coming towards the back end of the summer, early part of the autumn, is that we're already talking about working with various different groups about the social activity sessions for people where they can come and play on a Friday night as opposed to kicking around town and getting into mischief. So we're looking at lots of different programs and opportunities that we can kind of do that. You mentioned about swimming, take on board what you were saying around kits and equipment. That's something that we'll come and talk to our partners in swimming about, see if there's anything that we can learn from there. One of the things that I mentioned in the presentation is the advent of these inflatable swim sessions. You know, where people can come and have that, and that's targeted being quite inclusive. So it can be for families, it can be for teenagers. We also then have the advent that potentially, depending on usage, one of the things that we're doing in the full program now is starting to manage that, looking at the sessions that we've got and have popping about, is to see whether there's the advert potentially going like a full session where there's music and various different things going on with that. But that's just looking at the facility next to the program we've got going forward. So we have some ideas, nothing necessarily in concrete that's going to deliver that apart from the team session we've got, but appreciate the feedback.
Can I just add as well, you mentioned access arrangements and how people feel coming into the facilities. So our sale system, MRM, through, again, anybody that has had funding, has had support, etc., through our front of house systems, we get a membership subscription, doesn't necessarily have to say anything in it whatsoever, but then a membership card that will allow them access. So then nobody will be coming into the centre feeling any sort of stigma about how they've managed to get there, because we can handle that back of house without it needing to be seen. So we should be entering our facilities feeling all of that right.
How about gear? They need hire them, or do they have to have their, I mean, most of them have their own, but how are they coping?
Yeah, I guess that's something that we need to kind of see. I think in terms of hiring, that's certainly an option. Obviously, during COVID and whatever, not, it's not a possibility to hire them. And again, I think that's a question that we'll take back to our group of practice manager to see what other sites are doing around the UK that we manage to see if there's anything that we can get in there. If I'm honest, Angela, I don't have the answer on that, but we'll go away and see what else there is out there to see if there's some options that may well be able to improve.
Thank you very much indeed. I think that's a good question. I have one last question. I just wonder how it's sort of spiking in energy costs are affecting your business, and how you see that going forward.
It's the biggest risk of 2022. If you look at any of the industry press, UK active on the government about what that looks like. A significant tradition, for example, 55% of your energy costs for any leisure sector. So it's that environment alongside changing routes that are the cost item. So yes, that is the biggest risk leading into next year. What we are looking at across our estate, operating 200 leisure facilities across the country, is closely in line with QTAG guidance, which is the guidance, industry guidance for what you should be running the temperature of your swimming pools at. So we're currently looking at a number of items alongside to make sure that we are as streamlined and as efficient as we possibly can be. But yeah, you're absolutely right, it's the biggest risk leading into next year. So unfortunately, alongside anything else, we are having to look at our points, our price point, and also our energy efficiencies, our cost controls, absolutely everything, because yeah, it is the biggest risk. So we're on it.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Well, thank you all. Thank you very much indeed for your report. I think that's incredibly useful and really interesting. When we get this slide, so you can think about all that. It's very very useful. Lots to come out on that report. Thank you. Certainly received that. We have done. You're welcome to stay longer if you like, but please obviously feel free if you need to be away. Thanks very much indeed for coming on. That brings us on to 7, which is on the supplementary part of the and the governance report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the report to spread and just give you a little bit of background and then take you through the key messages moving forward. So this is our answer to 6 report, which we're required to present to you before we conclude the audit of financial statements and value for money work. And the reason we get this meeting is to give you an opportunity to consider the matters that we've identified during the audit and to get assurance that we can take the action to support this issue. As we noted in the report, we haven't yet fully concluded our audit procedures and therefore not yet in a position to issue our financial statements and conclude our value for money work. However, we have substantially completed most of our procedures and I'll give you an update on where we are in the areas that remain outstanding and the likely time for completion. I'd like to take you through just a few key areas of the report, so that we can further refer to page 13 of the reporting issue, which is our scope update. Members may recall, although it's been quite a long time ago now, but in our audit planning report, we identified 3 specific risks. So we identified a risk to recording revenue recognition in relation to sales fees and grant charge income, and we recognise that's a fraud risk. We also recognise a significant risk in relation to the government grants and COVID funding that the council is receiving, and then we identified a risk in relation to minimum revenue provision. Upon revisiting our planning procedures, we've actually changed all 3 of those risks. The first 2 are actually intrinsically linked because they both related to the COVID grant income. I think since we drafted our planning report, there's worked to clarity about the level of grant funding the council will receive, but also the nature of that funding and conditions related to that. And we're also aware that the council will take an assessment of the funding it received to determine whether it was principal or agent and how that should be accounted for. We therefore downgraded that risk from being a significant fraud risk and to be just higher inherent risk. So we still need additional procedures around that area because the volume of grant funding the council received, along with all other local authorities, but we no longer recognise it as a significant fraud risk. We'd also identified the minimum revenue provision as potential risk, because at that point we understood that the council was planning to review its MRP policy and change that policy. The council subsequently showed it wasn't going to make any changes to that, and therefore that no longer became a risk in our plan at all. Although we do obviously always check the MRP, but it was no longer an area of focus for us. So those are really the main changes since we issued our audit plan. We didn't identify any new risks, or we did downgrade some risks in the initial plan. You'll notice if you go to the next page, that we obviously say we haven't fully completed the audit. What I want to do is go through each of the key risk areas and just give you an update on where we are on each of those. At the time of drafting this report, we identified one misstatement which was being corrected by management. Again, I'll provide you with an update on that because we have now identified some potential further adjustments to the accounts. And as I said, I'll go through those when I go into particular. I want to draw your attention to a section of the report which talks about when we conclude the audit. So one of the other procedures we have to undertake is the whole of government accounts process on behalf of the NAO. Unfortunately, the NAO has still not issued its instructions for that work to be undertaken, and therefore we're not able to fully conclude our audit and issue our certificates until those instructions have been issued. Our understanding at the moment is that that's not planned to be until June or July, so in effect we have to hold back our certificate of completion of the audit until those instructions have been issued. We expect that the council will be below the threshold that requires us to undertake any work at all on that submission, but until the instructions have been issued, we can't confirm that, so we can't conclude. So you're in exactly the same position as every other authority across the country in relation to that. And as I said, it's no reflection on accounts, it's just that we can't conclude until those instructions have been issued. If I then move on to basically take you through the key areas of the focus, which is section 2 of the report, and start on page 18. I can't change the page 3 at some point in the line. So the first risk we identified was debt due to fraud and error. To address that risk, we look at usual transactions with key areas of estimates and judgment, and we also test journals. We have no substantially completed that work on journals. I think there's just a very small amount that we need to conclude on that, but we haven't identified any issues in the work we've undertaken on that to date. The next area we identified was the inappropriate capitalization of revenue expenditure. So to address that risk, we look at all the capital additions in the year and we test those on a sample basis. We have now concluded that work, that's all been reviewed, and there are no issues arising from that those procedures. We then also have higher inherent risks, so these are no longer a significant risk, but these are higher inherent risks identified. And we have identified those in relation to valuation of property, plant and equipment, and investment properties. You'll pretty much see these in all of our audit plans because they are highly material figures in the council's accounts, and they are subject to judgment and estimate. So they are quite complex calculations and estimates. We have completed our work on the council's investment property now. We're satisfied with those valuations and materially accurate and haven't identified any issues in relation to that work. We have asked our valuers to look at one of those assets for us because there was quite a significant reduction, and that's linked to basically the old overlay development and the change therefore in the sort of status of that particular asset over the last 12 months. So from an audit perspective, as a lay person, it makes sense to us because it's quite a large one. We've asked our valuers just to have a second look at that to confirm that that's a reasonable reduction.
How the second look, what form will that take?
So basically we would send the valuation to our internal valuers who would basically look at the assumptions, the inputs, the key judgments and conclude whether they think they're reasonable. And so one of the key areas of focus of external regulatory reviews of external auditors is ensuring that we bring in specialists where we should do. Valuations of property, plant and equipment and of pensions are two key areas where we pretty much always know bring in specialists to some degree or another because of the complex nature of those estimates and the fact that I'm an auditor, not a valuer. So it's the second look in terms of just bringing in a specialist to validate that information and those judgments. In relation to our property, plant and equipment work, we've undertaken some of that work in the audit team, and we've been liaising with the council's finance team and property team with some further questions around some of the, again, the inputs and judgments. We're just waiting for some of that information to come back to us now to conclude that work. We've also sent a small sample of assets off again to our valuation team to look at. And that's looking very much where our assets have either been impacted potentially by COVID-19, which we're very aware is continuing to impact on certain types of assets, and also where maybe because of the nature of assets, they're more susceptible to movement. Our is unfortunately not able to complete that work until after Easter, and so we're not likely to get their final report back until the first week of May, which will impact the timing of the conclusion of the audits. If I can then take you on to the next area, which is pension liability. So again, we undertake quite a lot of work here. We did some additional work this year using our own pensions actuaries to develop our own point estimate, affect the net liability, and that basically concluded that the net liability was materially stated based on the models they used. We did note that there was an unadjusted difference based on the report we got back from the pension fund auditor, where they identified a difference on pooled property asset valuations. That difference is only £238,000 for East Hertfordshire District Council. Therefore, the council doesn't propose to amend that, and we would just include that in our letter of representation. We were, however, made aware by the actuary that they had, I guess, made an error in their original IS19 report, that there's an entity called Herts Building Control, which is hosted, I think, by Hertfordshire County Council. When the actuary did their initial IS19 reports, they basically took out the assets for that body and in effect took them all over the Hertfordshire County Council assets. In effect, they should have spread it over the whole of Hertfordshire bodies, rather than just the County Council. They have therefore proposed that they could issue an updated IS19 report which amends that error, because at the moment what it means is that the assets of East Herts Council are overstated because they haven't been adjusted for that body. And therefore that would impact on your net liability. So my understanding is the finance team have asked the actuaries to provide that updated IS19 report, and we'll look at the differences between the figures when they come back, and if those differences are material, and we'd obviously expect them to be adjusted in the accounts. So that is nothing, it's not an error on behalf of the council at all. The council puts the correct figures in their accounts. It's just an issue that the actuaries picked up in terms of how they actually made that adjustment.
So if the error is material, when it might mean amendment to the accounts, will that put back the further, cause the final date to be put back further?
I would hope that put back there in the start of May. I mean, I don't know how long it will take the actuaries to produce those reports. They've traditionally done them very quickly when they've been asked to do updated reports. So as they have offered to do that, I would hope they would do that very quickly. It's then a case of putting through the amendments to the financial statements and the relevant pension notes. But again, I wouldn't have thought that would be a huge exercise. I don't think it may a risk in terms of signing it every day. Going concern disclosures, in effect, the going concern assessment has to cover a period of 12 months from the date of the audit report. Therefore, we are leaving this piece of work to the very end of the audit process, because the council will need to do a cash flow projection for that 12-month period. So I think we're now looking at a cash flow projection to the end of May rather than the end of April, which is what we were previously working to. So as soon as we've got that, we'll be able to complete our procedures on that. I don't anticipate any issues in terms of going concern assessments. We are very aware that the local authorities are a going concern. It's really just around the clarity of the disclosure and ensuring you just look at that 12-month period from the date of the audit report. And the key thing we're looking at is basically levels of reserves and cash 12 months forward on that date.
I was going to mention the level of reserves. In the past, we've been very well positioned in terms of that reserves, almost too well at that time. Things have changed over. What are your thoughts about the level of this council reserves in terms of audit work?
I mean, we don't tend to form a view on whether levels of reserves are. I know many years ago there was reference to kind of 5% level. I think that was communicated at some point, but as auditors, our role is just to make sure that the council has got an appropriate forward projection for an appropriate forward projection, which is normally based on your medium-term financial strategy, that takes into account appropriate assumptions. That it makes reasonable assumptions in terms of inflation, various other things like that. So we don't necessarily form a view on what level Director of Finance will recommend. What we do is basically say, well, have you made reasonable assumptions in forming your view? And if obviously if we were concerned that levels were getting too low and council was potentially getting close to Section 114 notice, then obviously that is when we would trigger it. As we haven't finished that going concern work yet, I can't really comment on your particular levels at the moment. But based on the accounts that I've seen, it's not something an area that gives me concern at the moment. If I can move you on to the next area, which is business rates and payment provision, we have finished our work on that area. This is an area where there was an audit difference identified. Again, that was not a difference that was due to an error in the council's calculation. What was identified was that Analyse Local, who are the external specialists that the council used to calculate this provision, in their spreadsheet for this year, they'd included additional information for 21-22 and 22-23 provisions, which is perfectly reasonable, but in the figure that's been calculated using the council's accounts, then the provisions for those 2 years have also been included. Therefore, that was an error. They should be removed, which resulted in overstatement of the provision. The overstatement of the provision was defined as 2.4 million at the overall collection fund level, and East Hertfordshire's share of that was 966,000. So the accounts are being amended to correct those two figures in the collection fund and the statements. The next area that we identified was group. We've largely concluded that work. We just need to check that the disclosures of the group are fully complete, but we're happy with the consolidation and all the other work around the group. We've also completed our work on the COVID grants now, and again, we're happy that there are no issues in relation to how the council determined whether it's acting as principal or agent, and then how the accounting for those grants has followed that determination, and also how we reflected any conditions, whether they were met or not, and therefore whether there's any repayments due back to sponsoring departments where funds haven't been spent by the due date. Probably wasn't to say any more in relation to value for money. Our work is in progress. We haven't yet fully completed it, but based on the work we've completed to date, we haven't identified any significant risks or significant weaknesses, and so we don't expect to be including any commentary in our opinion. I think just to draw to your attention that the VFM reporting this year is different than it has been in prior years, so now we include our VFM commentary in our auditor's annual report, which we will issue subsequent to our opinion. And therefore, the only reference, in effect, you get value for money is on a negative assurance basis. So if we had issues, there would be a qualification in our audit report. If we don't have any issues, then there's no reference in the audit report, and very little is in this audit results report. So your main commentary will be in the AIR, which will include a lot more detail than you've seen previously around value for money. So we'll include commentary on each individual area, regardless of whether we identified a risk or not. Whereas previously, we probably only looked at you if we identified a significant risk. So that's quite a change in the commentary that you'll get on value for this year.
Does that mean you need to update your work in this area?
Yes, and PSA actually issued guidance on the extra fee that they'll be approving for that work for different bodies, and we have included details of that in page 43 of the reporting fee section. So I think it's 6,000 to 11,000 for district council as the additional work required without any significant risk. That just recognises the extra work and the extra reporting. That wasn't to say anything more than to say. I think we're in a good position. Very few errors really that we've identified. As I said, the main areas we need to finish off now are PPE and just getting the updated pensions reports, and then we should be in a good position to be able to sign copies.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you. There was any questions on we've had a bunch of questions through. You mentioned about you were testing a sample of investment properties within Mill Street. I don't know if you mentioned that in part of the presentation. How big was the sample?
Try and remember how many investments we looked at. 4 investment properties. I think it covers quite a large percentage of the total balance because the investment properties are individually quite large. So I think it was, I can't remember whether it was 1 or 2. To remind me of the numbers, but yeah, we tested quite a number. I think what drove probably the additional work this year was both the continued impact of COVID-19. So although value did not issue blanket material uncertainties this year, there were still certain sectors and certain types of property were affected by COVID. But also the fact that the council does have obviously the overlay development, which means that some of your properties may be changing in kind of nature and intended use, so looking more than we'd expect other councils, and therefore that changes potentially their valuation. So we've just looked at some of those in a bit more detail. And the other one we picked out is hostels, because we've found that the valuation of hostels moved quite a lot again. I've had a number of our clients over the last year.
The Oliver Lane property is one of the ones you want to look at, isn't it?
It is, yes. Yeah, and one of those is split between investment property and operational property. So the same building is split on floors between, and it's valued on a different basis because of the different usage nature of those two elements of the building.
Questions? In terms of fees, and then, yeah, well, we said, I think there's 43 about fees. So, you're proposing an increase of the scale. Is that being looked at by the PSA?
Has been looked at by PSA, so we proposed that increase for the first time in 2019-20, along with additional increases for one-off 1920 issues, which were very much linked to COVID actually I think last year. So in total, across those two areas, for both the scale fee variation and the extra one-offs, PSA approved that 25,840, and they did provide the council with a breakdown of what elements they approved and what percentages of what we submitted did approve, what they maybe haven't approved at all. So they will just take the same process as 2021. So once we've concluded the audit, we will do a detailed analysis of both the base scale fee increase and then the extra one-offs for current year work. We'll obviously share that with management, and then PSA will determine that in the same way that they did for 1920.
Thank you. And this is kind of a draft report. So what will happen is we'll finish the work we need to finish. Then you'll issue the final report, and that will be looked at, Stephen, at the second point when we look at the final version of the result.
Yes, Chairman, that's the intention of when the audit's been finished, we will bring the statement of accounts for you to approve and the auditor's final audit results report. So it'll be a very quick meeting of the accounts approval subcommittee because there will only be those two items of business on there. That's assuming, of course, you approve the annual governance statement, which will be published alongside the statement of accounts this evening.
Thank you. So we'll be discussing now a bit later. What I would like to propose is that the subcommittee of this committee would meet to approve the accounts and the extent we need to approve to bring this process to a close. We think it might be at some point sort of early May. I think we need a quorum of any 3 members for that. Would members be in agreement that we could convene a meeting of a subcommittee? We could, more than 3 could attend, but we don't think we need at least 3 of us to be there for the meeting to be quorum rather than convening a meeting of the whole committee. Would that be acceptable to members? So if I can propose that from the chair, could I have a second? So those in favour of asking, thank you. So we've agreed then we'll convene a subcommittee of this committee to approve the accounts and also the management representation letter, etc. And that's a date to be agreed at some point between the first week of May. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much indeed for your report. Is there anything you need to add to that?
No, I think we've covered everything. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you very much. You're welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting. If you need to go off to another meeting, you're very welcome to be used.
Take on that kind of offer. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed for your attendance. Thank you. So in which case then that brings us on to the governance sentence, which is item 8, which is on the main back. That begins on page 121. So you can go to Item 7. Oh, sorry. Oh, yes, so on page 3, various recommendations. And if you members can turn to page 3 on the supplementary pack. So I recommend is receiving and making any comments on the original results report. And B, to note that the statement of accounts will need to be approved by a subcommittee which we've agreed to. And rather than it being in the week commencing 20th of April, it would be in the first week or so of May. And C, and maybe most important, thank the staff in the Strategic Finance Department for reducing the budget in the medium-term financial plan, as well as facilitating the delayed external audit commencing operation and close down of 2021. We've got those three recommendations. Apologies again for this. Are we able to take those on block? Councillor Huggins is proposing, Councillor secondly, we've got a proposal secondly for those three recommendations. Are those in favour? Thank you. Apologies again for listening. And again, particular thanks to you, Stephen, you and your team. Well, the two of your team, but the hard work, because it must have been an incredibly difficult few months. I'm not sure if there's an end to it. Anyway, we can now move on. And we're on item 8, which is the annual governance. Thank you.
Yes, Chairman. The annual governance statement is published alongside the statement of accounts. Members will recall you saw this in July. We made some comments on the annual governance statement in July, which have now been incorporated. This does refer to the 2021 financial year. So we are the governance statement, the state governance as it was in 2021. So any change in the action plan 21-22 will be recorded in the 21-22 annual governance statement. And so this statement before each management approval is, as you saw in July, with these changes that you want to be made. And I ask that members approve this so that we can publish it alongside the statement of accounts when we get there.
Thank you. And the question, we have seen it before. And as I think we commented at the time, it's a much more detailed piece of work than maybe we've been seeing previous to that. But I think because it is so detailed, I think it really does cover all the things that we need to be mindful of when we're looking at governance. I mean, I've been through it myself, and I think it's fun. I have done quite a lot. If there are any members that have any comments or questions on it, please do speak on them now. In which case, then, we have a recommendation, page 121, that we approve the government statement for 2020-2021. Councillor Townsend, thank you for proposing. That's all. Was that a second in there? Second. That's all the second. Fantastic. What was in favour? Brilliant. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. That brings us now to item 9. We haven't got an item 9, we've done that. There isn't one. Yeah.
No, just to say that I had rather hoped that we had a statement of accounts. It was my optimism, blind optimism.
That'll teach you.
That'll teach you.
So item 10, we go on to Order 3, strategic risk register. So your presentation earlier was a real taste of the main event.
Yeah, and Councillor, this is the Force 3 strategic risk register for members to take a look at. The risk register we're proposing for next year, the risk strategy remains unchanged, and the risks monitored at present are retained for 22-23. I take on board, Chairman, your comments about emerging risks and to incorporate them into the register going forward. I don't think there are any particularly stunning changes in the risk register at the moment, and from what you saw at your last meeting, and climate change and pandemic, etc. So, and you can see the reports there. So, I'm open to questions from members really.
Thank you. I'd like to say this report is a really excellent report. I think again, I think the standard reporting for officers is really first class. Any comments on this one? So the ultimate perennial sort of item that I tend to raise is the cyber risk, and I know we're waiting for sort of results of the internal audit sort of review on that before any consideration will be given to.
Just to remind members and officers as well that by the end of April you have to complete your managed cyber training. And what's the date there? It's the 5th of April. So if you haven't completed your mandatory cyber training, I encourage you to complete your mandatory cyber training, as it's mainly the human element in which cyber risks get through. So can I just remind members of the committee and officers present, if you haven't completed your cyber training, to do so by the 8th of April. That's an important part of our response to cyber risks. Is getting started with our members to take that training and understand what the cyber risks are. And if videos that you can watch, there's no quiz answer, there's no examination. I do encourage members and staff who haven't yet done it to do it by the 8th of April. That training is very important in our response to cyber.
So I think it's already set around a reminder to us all of that.
Yeah, the update I had on Friday was less than a third of councillors had completed. Hopefully that has changed over this weekend, but you will get another chase from me on the 8th. Apologies.
Session on the naughty step if we haven't done that.
Sure, Chairman, you've already done it.
You might think that. So that deals with cyber. A couple of items I just wanted to ask about. In the on page 165, we've got the matrix where various risks sit. I just wanted to ask about risk number 5, which is what forms a key partner or contractor. I appreciate sort of performance of the key partners and contractors have been materially affected by COVID, but for it to be sitting on sort of extreme right of the matrix means it's almost like a certainty to happen, or close to certainty, I think. And I wondered, are we really that pessimistic about the performance of some of our service providers?
Chairman, this is about, it's not about the extreme right, it's called a C4. So I mean, we do have to take into account that the contractors do go through failure. We have seen contractors fail. Customers at Carillion here went through a period when it looked very shaky, etc. We have seen major contractors fail. So this is about the risk environment in which major contractors operate. Now, we do go through regular credit risk scores. We do look at their performance. And then there are elements of this. I mean, it is very difficult now to get reference collection operatives and HGV drivers. Every reference collection vehicle, most reference collection vehicles we have are heavy goods vehicles, very heavy goods vehicle license. That's driving up costs in order to pay these people. And I think vacancies are running at something like 30%. I think the base is currently missing a number of grounds or a number of streets on grounds, which we're working with them to catch up with as well and to deal with staffing issues. That's down to staffing shortages. So there is a risk there that, for example, that contractor is going to fail to meet its contractual obligations. There's no point in throwing penalties at them because it's an industry fact that it's very, very difficult to recruit. So what we have to do is work with them to help them recruit and to put the service back, because what will happen is what is happening, an avalanche of telephone calls and emails. So when we talk about contractors failing, it's not just as simple as saying a contractor is going to go bust. That is obviously the risk, but there are other factors in there, some of which are beyond our control and beyond the control of the contractor. It's just a factor of the economy and the way it's changed over the last 2 years. So it's been cognizant of those risks, putting in place where we can mitigations, and that includes training up people locally to work locally. Assisting them to put people through HGV training with necessary contractual arrangements that if they get that HGV license, they have to stay a number of years or they have to buy out that particular training. It's those sort of things, and it's that dynamic conversation with the contractor to put a service back to where it should be. Because if we just take the traditional route of you failed, it's a penalty, we'll end up with that contractor into what I call the spiral of despair. And then the service will just go absolutely not where you want it to be. And having worked at council where a waste contractor failed from day one to complete a whole rounds, and we had 3 years of what I can only describe as the worst hell on earth. And that's not the sort of place you want to go and where we want the council to be. So we will work with contractors to put them back where they should be. And that's a positive partnership approach. So when we talk about contractor failure, there's a whole gamut of things that could fail. I mean, there could be, a national fuel shortage. And during the national fuel shortage, for example, we worked very hard to keep refuse vehicles on the road. And that did involve, mutual arrangements with other local authorities and things like that. But there was a risk we could fail to collect that rubbish simply because there wasn't fuel. So there's a whole gamut of stuff in there. And where we are in the economy at the moment, with shortages in the supply chain bottlenecks, there is a risk of failure. So don't think we're just somebody going bust. So there is that constant what we're working through because of those supply chain issues.
But again, because it's a supplementary, are we happy with the impact as low as we've got a reputation on it, indeed a financial point of view? Could the impact on the council be higher than if well as the lowest?
Well, the refuse issues amount are in Q1 of 22-23. So this reflects the end of Q3 when that score was appropriate. If you're talking about today, that score is probably higher now because of the issues that we are having on that particular contract. So this is reflecting Q3 of 21-22. So looking backwards, it's not today's risk.
I see that. I had a similar question on item risk 6, which I think is judicial risk of a judicial review, for instance. And I just wondered again, and maybe this is backward looking, maybe it's not something, but maybe going forward, maybe again from a reputational point of view and either financial potential one or more judicial reviews have a bigger impact on accounts than we're showing in the matrix.
I think I know what you're alluding to, Chair. Yes, there's always a risk of judicial review in whatever we do. If I'm right about the one I was talking about, we actually indemnify against costs on that one.
And the last, I guess, is risk 13, which relates to business continuity plan conversion purpose. It's got a low likelihood in terms of its sort of left-hand side of the matrix. Again, are we happy that the likelihood of anything nasty happening shouldn't be represented by a greater likelihood in this matrix?
Well, based on a major incident occurring, I think that's a reasonable score. And on the equivalent of the plan failing, well, we have been exercising indeed emergency plan and business continuity plans kicked in over COVID. And we managed to take the workforce that was predominantly office-based and split it to be predominantly home-based. And we managed to do that within a couple of weeks without any noticeable loss of service or continuity, etc. So we know this, we know we can do this stuff. In terms of major incident, it's not the winter now, but we could have flooding in the winter, but I can't predict whether that will actually form a major incident. We have aircraft flying over Bishop Stortford area all the time in and out of Stansted. I can't predict. The likelihood is very low based on a statistical likelihood. It is very, very low. So an incident is occurring, and because we exercise the plans and because we're part of the Hertfordshire Resilience Partnership with the County Council as well, we have, of course, the Hertfordshire County Council in our planning and exercising our plans. And at the end of the day, we can also call on other local authorities around us, like the mutual aid arrangements as well. But the likelihood of the plan failing, I think, is very low. Every member of the leadership team spends a week on call, out of hours, so we are able to respond to an emergency. I can't go anywhere with that in my mobile phone, the emergency plan. For a week, and we do know that our business continuity arrangements work. We had outages of IT for a whole week, and we managed to keep going. In the past, we managed to different office-based organisations to COVID. So I think that low risk score reflects reality.
One last point on page 191, the update on the current position. We talk about our IT systems don't currently meet the capital requirements in terms of being able to access. So is that being what happened? I think it just mentioned that work is being done to enable us to access this report. And how serious could this be, and how close are we to being able to access? Do you know?
The implications of not being able to access the government systems means we will be locked out of the Department of Work and Pension systems, which means we cannot process any housing benefits. And we can't process any local council tax support. And that will bring DWP down as like 10 bricks. So that's one of the most serious implications of not being able to. We have been working on server configurations, servers being updated from defunct software that they are, and we're also working on firewalls, etc. That the network as it stands at the moment is a lot more secure than it was. A number of there was a shutdown over the recent weekend, which was to enable further cyber resilience to be put in place. There are what we call DMZs, And virtual, and, the firewalls will be replaced by virtual firewalls within. They start talking about how's your environment and all this sort of stuff, sort of technically over my head. But basically what we have is being upgraded to where it needs to be. And where we can't upgrade to where it needs to be in the short term is being placed into it behind a DMZ. I mean, you're going to try and serve normally, but it's in the safe area where it's very hard to access. And part of what we're doing about the cyber training is to enhance people's awareness of cyber attacks as well. And we have been very, very careful to move a number of systems that have been moved and upgraded onto newer platforms. And we did have housing benefits staff have to work in the office for 3 days. All of them had to come in the office for 3 days until we could resolve a potential vulnerability in the housing benefit system where we couldn't possibly have it working over virtual desktops at home. It was perfectly safe in the office behind firewalls in the office, but at home there was a vulnerability. So until that vulnerability was fixed, all the staff were actually in the office processing benefits for 3 days until that vulnerability was sorted.
So is this then depending on moving on to Windows 10? Is that how will that want to be over once we've done that?
It's a combination of which desktop you're on, so moving from Windows 7 to Windows 10, it's also which version of the operating systems that they're on. So we have a number of servers which have older operating systems. SQL, what's called SQL Server, which is a type of relational database management system. So we need to upgrade onto the newer versions. So part of what's going on as well as moving our VDI desktop, virtual desktop as well, we're moving and upgrading servers, but those servers will no longer be physical machines in a data center. They become virtual within the cloud. And we are also moving a number of our on-premise business systems, which can only be delivered via the desktop, into a cloud arrangement where the desktop becomes increasingly redundant.
Sure. So is this shortcoming of identified benefit in any way? Is this something we need to keep an eye on in terms of our future meetings?
It is a key priority for IT to resolve any cyber issues as they arise, which is why, as I say, the system shutdowns in order that work that we've done to make systems more secure. And it is being worked on, and we are majorly aware of the current climate in Europe of the potential cyber attacks from the state player. So again, much like training is going forward, and we are confident that our systems have sufficient firewalls, etc. But as I say, it's usually the human element that lets these things through, which is why the training is really, really important to do.
So does this form part of your review of cyber stuff? Maybe you answer.
Yes, Chair, we've actually completed our cyber security audit, which was done last month. Currently waiting for management response on that. I did finalise the rules, circulating.
That's very encouraging. Thank you very much. Thanks very much. Thank you. That's useful. So, if there are further questions, the recommendations on page 163, there are 3 of them. 2021-22 corporate strategic expenditure to be reviewed, done, and officers advise of any further action to be taken to manage risk. Recommendation B is that the risks monitored at present are retained in 22-23. Risk management strategy remains unchanged. I think that's fine. I think it's fine. We need to sort of predicate any points that we got on cyber, results of the cyber internal audit. In terms of maybe we might have some different ideas on how we treat cyber risk. But apart from that, are we happy, members, to make the 3 recommendations on page 163? That's proposed. This proposed. Let's move with the second. All those in favour? Thank you. On to page 219. Next question, please.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, starting at page 219 of the report pack, being asked for the internal audit plan 2023. There's a lot of narrative there, covering our funding principles, assumptions, service, risk assessment methodology, and placing emphasis on core business processes. There's also material in there relating to our approach planning, showing especially how we practice and the context that we consider, such as programs of change for local authorities. The plan for next year, this year I guess, is summarised at page 227 with detailed page 220. As you can see, we've incorporated financial systems, cycle audits, insurance approach. There's also a range of operational services and corporate themes for auditing, coverage of ICT, provision of shared audits with exercise. Also to say, the plan was to approved by the senior leadership team this month. I think the only other point I'd make at this time is that should we need to revise the plan, we'll do that during the course of the year and we'll bring it back to members today. So I report to the chair.
Thank you. Any questions? So you've got, there's a list, this report, this plan represents sort of the reduction in days that was agreed as part of the budget process. And this, at the time, you said, with the reduction, does the plan that you've put forward kind of fit nicely within the number of days that are allocated?
Yes, Chair, the plan for you matches the
And you touched on insurance mapping presentation. Indeed, we've received some reports from you, which are kind of insurance mapping, sort of based. How is this sort of changing the way we work? And in terms of setting up this new way of working, did that take much work to get to where we are now?
Yes, it was described by members of the team to me as being a marathon rather than a sprint. It's, if you think of it as a toolbox, it's a different set of tools. Some of them have been this for quite some number of years. So it represents quite a change. We looked at what best practice was, developed our own model, so we started to roll out those audits that we traditionally covered on an annual basis. But I think where we have a strong history of issuing reports with substantial assurance, recommendations, look to expand it enables us to not just place reliance upon our own work, but work at third parties. And indeed the council's own management to lapse. So the combination of all that.
Thank you. Stephen, I know you commented but you feel this is a step forward in terms of being able to identify what's going on, what things aren't going on. And also it's enabled us to reduce the level of because it's a more efficient report.
Yes, Chairman, I find them far more useful than a traditional what I call ticking batch which tells me, oh great, you tested 40 of these things and they managed to import them correctly. Whereas this gives you a much more rounded view of the service as a whole and its risk environment, its control environment. So you can see management controls, you can see what the process system controls give. And we will on a cyclical basis do the cyclical bash on those services. But this is much more powerful for me because I can see where there is over control, under control, where some things need tweaking, and it gives me a much better view of the whole system process. I find it much more powerful and better for me to know where I need to take action on systems. Alison, you feel the same? I get more by one officer, yeah. For us, the testing the credit stuff for me was fantastic. I know we can process testing credit. I know we can. But it was highlighting issues that I needed to focus in on, and that for me is much more powerful. And I think it's more interesting for internal auditors as well. And yes, there is this hump of work that you do in the first year, but then that sort of tails off as well. But I feel I've got more value for money for every hour they spent doing that assurance mapping than I would from them having gone ticking back 40 invoices.
Thank you. I think certainly from the reports that we've been getting from you, that's kind of useful. These for us to understand. So thank you so much for your hard work, your team's hard work again. That's where we are now. I guess you've got some bit of work to be doing. So we need to work on. Thank you. In terms of this report, I think we've just received it, is that right? Approved apologies. Councillor Townsend got in there first. Councillor Manley second. President second. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Thank you. So thanks very much. Thanks so much. You're welcome to stay. It's a much better meeting.
I will dash.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. I'm sorry. You're on. 12. Shared full service. Page 237.
Thank you, Chair. Two parts to my report. Starts off with the executive plan, proposed plan for 22-23, and the second part of the report is the activity in what was currently when the report was written, but it's now last year because we're in April. Chair, with your permission, I'll actually take the second part of the report first, which starts at page 240, section 4 of the report. And this is just the update of the first three quarters of 21-22, where we noticed that the number of allegations or referrals of fraud affecting council services have reduced considerably compared to previous years, and in particular the year prior. We are working with officers to try and understand why we're seeing that reduction compared to the historical reports that we've seen across the authority. In table 1, we just show which services have been affected by those referrals that have been received in. The majority still relate to council tax and house benefit matters. 3 referrals, which we classify as payment fraud, actually relate to COVID grants. I will mention fraud around COVID grants later in my report. Table 2 just reports previous reporting fraud to us. Staff still reporting matters to us, the public is still reporting matters, although, as I mentioned earlier, the volume of work committed service reactive work is reduced. At the time of reporting, we had 24 live cases with an estimated fraud loss, potential fraud loss of £186,000. We had 19 cases closed and 21-22 with around £50,000 of fraud loss of savings. Small number of financial penalties that were applied council tax cases, and 2 cases being referred to the council's legal team involved for serious matters of fraud. 4.6, just mentioned there, we're still seeing this delay, although since Christmas, certainly the workload and our ability to deal with cases working with partners such as DPP has increased significantly. So we are seeing more throughput of those cases which have been delayed. 4.8, just mentioned there in some detail the work that we've been doing with officers around the National Fraud Initiative. And when I mention that, you will see officers' eyes roll to the back of their head. It's a massive exercise, involves a number of crunching. We need to look at lots of matches to ensure the data that the council holds is correct. But it is particularly urgent for staff team for those. I'll just pick up, just going back to the issue around grant fraud. The final report we received in summer 2021 identified 26 grant awards the council issued and need further review. This can actually really pleased to say that 26 grants that needed a review, all found to be correct, all paid properly. There were no issues with any of the grants paid by East Arts Council. So although we had some fraud reports to us at the point that people make applications, no fraudulent applications have actually gone through the process at this time. So fantastic work. That's why
That's really something.
Yeah.
Considering the amount of applications that have to come through at time.
The volume and speed with which those grants had to be dealt with, and the changing nature of the grants as well, as went from March 2020 through to again beginning of this year, where the new grant schemes being rolled out by the government. The response from officers of the council was fantastic. So I'd like to say that perhaps why the external auditors decided to look at grant for the East Arts Council, but it might be with other technical issues. And then just around 4.9 again, we mentioned the other work that we've done to support the authority. So looking at business grants, we've also been looking at those new emerging fraud threats that we've been seeing, and our ability to network with organisations allows us to share those new fraud threats that we've seen. In fact, I've emailed Stephen this evening with a whole list of new ones that we're starting to see, some of which relate to cyber. This is just about awareness and sharing information across organisations. So we continue to work with closely with housing providers across the authority. So although the authority doesn't have any stock of its own social housing stock, there is a risk that people will still abuse that social housing stock that belongs to the social housing providers. So we work with them to ensure that those matters can be investigated. Where we're able to recover those properties, that they'll be let to people from the housing council's housing register, so they go back to local residents for use. We've taken on a new role of the anti-money laundering officer for the authority. We'll be rolling out some additional training, some training on the internet, some training for relevant officers on the money laundering rules. Our KPIs are shown at Appendix B. We don't intend to address that too much. We're on target to achieve. We've achieved all those targets by year. We'll bring in a more detailed report to this committee in the summer, which will break down all of that activity was undertaken during 21-22. Chair, if I can just very briefly mention our plan, which has been shared with officers. Just a couple of points to pick up with this. The plan obviously supports the council's anti-fraud strategy, ensuring the council, working in partnership with SAPS, has in place effective resources and controls to prevent and deter fraud, as well as investigate those matters that do arise. SAPS board agreed to a slight increase in fees to meet some additional costs of the service. So fees for the authority have risen to £86,165 for 22-23, 2.5% increase in that fees. We have put together a medium-term financial plan that shows a way to sustain the service in its current state for the next 3 years. Full complement of staff is shown again in the report. The East Arts Council will have access to one council officer, as well as access to our intelligence functions, data management services, through the Arts Fraud Hub, their on-call access to SAPS management, videos on the committee meetings, accredited financial investigator that supports our investigations. We also have access to third-party IT, forensics, covert surveillance, and national accounting intelligence services, fraud intelligence services provided by third parties that we work with, as well as litigation service within the council and at the county council as well. There is a detailed work plan that we break down to show where we're supporting services across the authority. There is an action plan, and there are KPIs that have been agreed for the service 22-23 as well. I'll leave it there because it's been a very long agenda. I'm happy to take the questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Very succinct. You mentioned the number at page 240, the number of allegations referrals was kind of low. In terms of the makeup of the various referrals, are the sort of proportions kind of the same as it would normally be in terms of council tax related, the biggest kind of area, and sort of public domain sort of area where these kind of referrals and leads coming from?
Yeah, they're usually linked to council tax benefits or housing benefits, those sort of income-based awards, and it can often be as a result of an error as well as fraud. So we need to move to that second stage where we identify there's been a change and there's been a deliberate change or something. Where we'd expect to see more fraud reporting is around housing, particularly in relation to housing registers. So we've been doing some work with the housing team to try and encourage, make them aware of what risk might be, encourage those officers to report those matters to us, and also to use their data more frequently as part of the fraud hub, so we can try and identify any trends that we see in the housing register. I expect that to be higher than it is at the moment, proportionately compared to council tax housing.
Thank you. In terms of the membership, the ships that are shown on the fraud service, are part of the plans to expand the membership, or is it very static?
As a partnership, it's been fairly static since Luton joined us in 2017, but we do talk to the other 5 boroughs and district councils across the county. So it's not that they're not involved in working with us, but they're not part of that partnership where we are deliberately working together, looking to share information. So we do work with the other authorities, and certainly if we were an opportunity for those other authorities to join the shared export service, something we speak to Steve and the rest of the board about to see how we make that work for our partnership.
Thank you. The fraud hub, you mentioned that tonight, we've heard about that in previous meetings. How that going? I think is it proving a success?
It will be. We've been trying to get the AI working within the fraud hub in a way that makes sense to us, and it's producing lots of output, but still lots of false positives. So what we're trying to do is train the system to understand that actually if data exists here, if data exists there, that's not fraud. That's actually all right. It needs to do some more work to understand actually is that a discrepancy that needs to be investigated, or actually is it okay? So we're plowing those results back into the fraud hub, so it understands how we're putting data in there. It will be an effective tool. I think it will provide us with lots of assurance as well as potential fraud, and that's what we're looking for, making sure that data is as clean and as possible.
Thank you. And we need to go back to page 237. I think there are 2 recommendations to approve the anti-fraud plan of 2022-23 and to activity project account against fraud and corruption in 21-22. We're happy to cut up and go on. That's fine. I don't cut up things. Those in favour? Thank you. Thank you very much, Steve. You're very welcome to stay or as part of the meeting. Thank you very much indeed. So it's item 13, Q3 forecast to year end, which came, I think, in the supplementary accounts. I don't know if it's begin on page 59. Alison.
Thank you, Chair. This is the industry budget monitoring report, which works 2 key messages that will cost the overspend of £95,000 for what we have to program to use of which 27 million carried over to 2023. Contained within the revenue expenses £110,000. This is made up of overspending on strategic finance due to reduced rental income, and operations of reduced parking income, mainly in Audit. This is offset by additional borrowing income as we have revenue benefits and savings on salary projects, HR and communication services. The other key figure within the revenue funding is that funding is forecast to be lower in the budget. This is mainly due to one income being credited to net services rather than to reserves and years. So it's just a change in how we're putting those on distributed accounts. There's not a reduction of one income we receive, we're just utilising it rather than transferring to reserves. The other point to mention is that wage debt position is reduced from almost 2 positions down to 2.2 million debts outstanding. The Risk to reduction is the large debts obtained at the early part of quarter 3, which is 2002, so the fluctuations in numbers. Debts are managed and reviewed regularly, and we will be looking at a report later to be written as part of that review shortly.
Very much indeed, thank you for that. The overspend actually has improved since the quarter 2 figures we posted, and I think at that point we thought it was a pretty good effort. So we must congratulate you with council for having a slightly better position, so projected position than we did last time. Members, any comments you would like to share? In terms of the various budget headings that we're doing at the moment, I'm not sure. Revenue benefits continues to be one of the standout performers in this regard. And one of the principal reasons for this is sort of the receipt of more sort of, or continued receipt of grants from central government. How long do we think? How long do you think these will likely last? When they stop, is that going to mean that the revenue benefits will stop, or will be less likely?
The grants are receiving now new burdens grants, so where additional burdens are being placed on the state benefits team, are obviously getting whether the COVID grants that we're doing, all those sorts of things. So I would say these new burdens will not continue in the long term, which is why they're budgeted for their additional sources of funding. As you'll see, it is a large number that we're overachieving by this year. We would look to potentially use some of that to reserves if we can do that.
There's a department that must be performing incredibly to absorb this additional subsidy.
If I could just say, Chairman, whilst we have received a large amount of new burdens funding for a large amount of work, members will start to see the impact of what that work has had on the council's in-year collection performance and in the time it's taken to process new claims and changing circumstances and health benefits. So whilst you can see the new burdens funding coming in, and whilst you can see vast amounts of work to get those business grants out, it has come at the cost of collection rates, and it has come at the cost of it taking longer to process housing benefit claims. So you will see that it's now starting to have a major effect on the council's ability to collect revenue and its ability to process housing benefit. Because the government seems to love throwing money at us to get out the door. You know, one is what amounts to revenues and customers and farm work and pensions before. You know, we are the government conduit of choice to get money out the door. But the day job is now starting to suffer. And we are also seeing, because the stress and strain in that particular service, people have had enough and they're walking. They haven't necessarily got jobs to go to, or they're choosing to retire early than they would have done because the pressure's got to them. So, you know, whilst financially it might look very good, there is a toll on performance to the customer and there's a toll on the staff as well. So, whilst the new burdens funding money looks good, there is a cost to the council, and that cost to manifest itself. And we'll start to see that coming through this year, I think.
In terms of the length of time it's taken to process housing benefit claims, where would we be looking at that? Because we must take that very seriously for the council.
Yes, I mean, it's one of the key business metrics which the leadership team will be monitoring, and it's something the Department of Work and Pensions monitors, because they have to submit the timetable to the DWP every month, and the DWP are monitoring it. But the DWP are going to have to give leeway to local authorities because of the sheer amount of volume of stuff that we have to do on COVID. One of the very disappointing things is the DWP has now rescinded the ability that claimants had to photograph their evidence and send it to us. Now we have to see the original documents again. Yeah, so all of the electronic digital stuff that they allowed during COVID, they're now starting to rescind, which is just making life harder and means there are more customer interactions, etc., etc. And you know, some of the advantages we have in COVID to go electronic, they're now being taken away, and you know that's going to now impact as well. So yes, the money's very nice, but
yeah,
we have to see. I think you have to see it in the round, Chair.
Yeah, but universal print, is that an effect? The amount of work that needs to be done in that area. maybe it's not.
I think that's a bit of a detailed question. I'd have to ask Steve Tarrant to answer.
Thank you. No members have got any questions. Councillor Townsend.
Because I'm an expert at asking idiot questions, the obvious international situation as it stands presumably will add even further loading on revenue payments because of incoming immigration and the demands that they're going to be placed on the system. Have we any indication as yet as to what that workload might be or the added impact that might land on our doorstep?
We're unsure yet whether it will be social services that will be responsible for dealing with payments or whether it will be RS events to deal with it. It will be predominantly a county function and a social services function, although the inspection of housing to make sure it's suitable, we believe the district council function. This is still emerging stuff. There's no clarity on it. There's no 100% clarity on it yet. The county were wanting to make it a county show, won't be just a county about it. I think with our housing expertise, we're like, that's a bit dark. So we're definitely doing the housing inspection stuff. Where that payment sits, I'm not entirely sure. I think it may be with social services like the check. And as you know, there's no immediate question. There's never an immediate question. And if there is, I'm achieving these in the room. So
Thank you very much for your knowledge advice.
Again, on page 64, we've got an unspent amount of 404,000 under shared business and technology services. Can you remind us what that might relate to?
So that was from work that was programmed to carried out in 2021 by the shared service. However, the program slipped that, so then we slipped the budget to 21-22, the current financial year that we moved on. So that was slipped into 2021 for the shared service to carry out that work there, so moving the budget rather than impacting revenue in 21-22.
Sure. So it's still that fund has also sort of kept within the shared business technology.
Yes, so we moved it to reserve, so reduced by.
Sorry.
if I could just say, Chairman, the Sovereignty review, one of the lessons arising from the Sovereignty review of the ICT service is that there will be a joint committee for the ICT service. There is the resident service, so there will be a committee that going forward to increase the governance of the ICT shared service. And the ICT function and IT manager has been told to go and get consultants and to complete within 6 months the infrastructure project that is still outstanding. So the BDI and the service will all be completed by an external partner who will be procured, and they will do it within 6 months and will pay them because it has gone on long enough and that's enough. And it must be brought to an end. And that is one of the key priorities that they have to deliver within 6 months, the end to this infrastructure project. So that's done and dusted. Get on and move on. So I just actually reassure you that money will be spent.
I think that's very good. I think members that are all being very good about it. Thank you. Principally by use of reserves, 185,000. Can you just wonder where we're coming from?
Sorry, Chair, which reserves they were coming from?
Yeah.
Just off the top of my head.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah, so the majority of them comes from the hands rates and not just fair reserve. So then we can run off the project.
Thank you. Any other questions? We've got the capital program. I think that was all fairly straightforward. I think in terms of debtors, your projects is sort of start writing off aged and sort of practically recoverable debt. How's that?
We've been working our way through this, Chairman. There's quite a lot to work through, and some of it has quite a complicated history and legal. One of the things we are proposing to do under transforming East Hearts is I'm proposing to take all debt collection, which is presently involves service areas. I'm proposing to take that back into finance, become a centralised function within finance, and we will go through this. And if it's not collectible, we will write it off. And we will start using proper credit control management on people. Writing letters to people generally does not work. Telephoning them, and especially telephoning them when you least expect them, like 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning, gets results, and that's what I've done in the past, and that's what I will do. We'll also use nudge theory, behavioural economics, in some of our chase letters. You know, things like most people in East Hertfordshire pay their invoices on time, and I am disappointed to see that you are not one of them. Now, that usually has an effect on people, and usually it causes them to get quite irate and bring up, at which point I've got them and send them in contact with me, and they're going to get their card out and pay. So we will bring that, essentially into finance. There are a number of service areas where it's just not happening at all. Or if it does happen, it's relatively slow. There are tricks doing this, and I believe that by bringing in essentially, we can improve our performance on debt management, and the quick growth of that is that we should be able to reduce our impairment of debts in the account. So, and it will improve the council's cash flow as well. So one of the things I'm determined to do as a transform these times is to bring that into finance and get this sorted and under control.
One last question on the capital program, page 67, paragraph 5.2. Talk about the revised budget has been reduced by 404,000 due to both funds for depot projects moving to be approved but not yet committed. Explain what that means.
Chairman, within the capital programme, we have the ordinary stuff at the top, which is approved and funded, and then we have underneath what principally is a contingency amount. That means that when something comes up or if an event is reached, then I, in consultation with Councillor Williamson, can then just move that. We don't have to go to council to seek the approval for that capital project. Council has given that approval as a means of funding it, but it's not actually in the capital programme's budget as such. So we're not sure it's going to go ahead. So rather than put it up there, monitor it, and then say we're not spending anything against it, we keep it below the line, but below the line approved by council, which means Councillor Williamson and I can move above the line if it's going to start. So it's a way of improving it, because otherwise it looks like we can't manage the budget. Sure. Yeah, so if you've got these contingency amounts that you may or may not spend, it's better to keep them in what I call approved but not committed. And then Councillor Williamson and I in consultation can then commit. It's a way of not having to call an extraordinary full council meeting, you know, to use a contingency amount, that sort of thing. So that's what that approved but not committed section means. And you've seen that the first time last year and again this year when you approve the capital programme and budget council.
Thank you for the reminder. Thank you. Members, I think points we've moved to page 59. The two recommendations A and B, I think, which is essentially noting the projected overspend of 95,000 budget. So the position in regard to the last capital budget. Two recommendations on page 59. Are we happy to move those two recommendations? Yes, so thank you very much. Yes, that's all that the Berlin's proposals. All those in favour? So, thank you. Item 14 is the work program. So, is there anything you wanted to deal with this or just?
No, Chairman, is there members to make observations on or comments on if they want to change the training? It's a moving piece with regards to the externals audit planning reports. You know, I'm hoping they've got one by the end of May, but
you all do.
I hope to have an audit opinion by then, so you know, maybe wildly optimistic.
The next meeting is on the 31st of May, I think.
The next meeting, full meeting of the committee, the first meeting of the next municipal year, yes, on the 31st of May, there will of course be the subcommittee, which may or may not happen before annual council.
Comments or questions with regard to the work program? I think the new format, as I said before, is very useful and much easier for us to understand, and it ties in with actually the work we need to transact. So that works extremely well. There are no questions. Recommendations. Recommendation A is to approve the work program. It's easy. Item B is specifying training requirements. Are there any training requirements over and above those that we have listed? Maybe not for now. And then a few days in after the next. But a reasonable amount of variance for training to undertake over the course satisfied. So the two recommendations are 255. First is to approve work program. Secondly, at this time specifying any trade requirements. So with the recommendations to stand. Councillor Townsend, Councillor Hammer, thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Okay. Office lights and survey. Thanks very much indeed for sticking with it.